Welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast. I'm Lonnie Goldsmith, the editor of TC Folk. This week I talked to Gabriel Flaum, the creator of the TC Curator Instagram account for buying and selling a variety of artwork. We talk about how he got his business started, the advantage of getting out of the corporate 9-to-5 world, and following familial footsteps and helping people on this week's Who the Folk podcast. But before we hear from Gabriel, be sure to check out the refreshed TC Folk merch store with newly designed stickers, shirts, hats, and tote bags that help support our mission and help you look fun and stylish. Check it out at tcjufolk.com/store. Gabriel Flaum, welcome to the Who the Folk podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Very excited to get to talk to you. You recently spoke at a J-Link happy hour event. J-Link, one of the in real life and online properties that TC Folk manages. You have a really incredible Instagram account which is part of what you were speaking about, which is the TC Curator, where you are a collector and reseller here in the Twin Cities. Tell me a little bit about what the TC Curator is and how you got into this line of work.
So thank you. So the TC Curator is my business where I go around the Twin Cities looking for specific items, home decor and art that I think that speaks to me and that I think will speak to other people. And what I typically look for is antiques, antique potteries or antique ceramics, glass and porcelain, from antique to contemporary, and same with the artwork from 18th century all the way up to modern day art. And how I got into this, by selling Pokemon cards underneath the playground in elementary school, and eventually led me to selling video games throughout college, and it paid for my college. And then working with my great uncle who had an antique store in Madison Square, and then traveling Europe and going to museums and looking at quality objects and figuring out what quality is, and started looking for it around the Twin Cities.
So is your background in like art or art history, or?
I got my degree in finance.
Oh, okay.
So my background is very finance, it's very math oriented. Art was always a secondary thing to me. It was something that I just had a passion for. I just liked going to museums. I liked watching Antiques Roadshow. I enjoyed being in antique stores and museums, and eventually I decided to say, hey, I'm just going to buy things I like, keep them, and then eventually sell them.
That's fascinating. When I was a kid, it's funny you mentioned the Pokemon cards. I was sort of always into baseball cards and in comic books, and I thought they were just cool. The problem was, like, I wanted to like read the comics. I didn't want them to just sit in plastic, and like I wanted to look at the cards and like handle the cards. And the idea, somebody's like, yeah, but like somebody may say that this card is worth however many hundreds or thousands of dollars, but it's really only worth what somebody's willing to pay for it.
Exactly.
And so I'm like, oh, that, like, all of it, like the idea of like you could have all these really cool baseball cards, but you couldn't touch them. Like, it just didn't seem to appeal to me. So I'm like, forget it. I'll just, I'll get the cards. I'll
play with them, enjoy them.
Right. I'll chew the terrible bubble gum and then move on.
Yeah. Like that's what they were meant to be used for. They were meant for enjoyment, not just to sit in plastic.
No, absolutely. But you have turned the idea of, sort of collecting, obviously not baseball cards, but you've turned the idea of collecting and sort of turning, sort of art as commodity in a way. Maybe I'm oversimplifying, but you've turned it into what looks like a really fun business, though.
Yeah, and I get to wake up every morning and do exactly what I want to do when I want to do it, and meet amazing people and talk to amazing people every day who just want to get to find new homes for their art and for their collectibles.
So do people reach out to you if they have a particular piece that they're either looking to acquire or looking to sell?
Yeah, so I do get phone calls from different people. As the quote says, there's a quote that says, um, "Good word moves slowly." So I do get reached out not as often as I would like, but I do. People call me and say, "Gabe, I have X, Y, and Z. Is this something that you're interested in?" And most of the time, it's, yeah, I do have an interest in that. Let me come take a look. And even if I can't buy it, or they we can't agree on a way of me purchasing it, I do help them in some sort of way to find their item a new home.
Okay. Okay. Well, I mean, it's great that there's this opportunity to do that because I think that, selling of those products, those types of products, I feel it is a lot harder than, comics or baseball cards, right? It feels like the
Yes, it
opportunities
it
are probably not as readily available for pieces of art or, really interesting pottery or glassware.
Yeah. Like I just picked up a piece of glass by Stephen Rolfe Powell, who's an American artist that studied under a glass master in Italy by the name of Lino Talapetra. Say that three times fast. And his stuff is highly desirable and very scarce. And his stuff brings top dollar amounts, and you just don't find it. And I was lucky enough to find a piece locally, and it's on my eBay now, and I'm just waiting for the right person to come buy it.
That's fantastic. It's I mean, and you have to sort of know the commute. You have to know the artwork, but you also have to know the
Yes.
community of people who have that type of work in their
Yeah.
house that they're looking either to, to acquire more
Acquire.
of or move on from.
Yeah, so I reached out to a few people, a few of my private clients that would have had interest in it, but unfortunately they said there was no space in their house at the time
Mm,
being, and they also did buy a few other things before I reached out to them. And if it was the other way, they would rather have my piece versus the other pieces that they bought.
sure. Which, which makes sense, but obviously,
Yeah, 2020 hindsight.
that's right. And also,
Yeah,
there is only so much money to go around.
mm,
There's only so
right.
much there's only so much space in your house. There's,
Hmm.
that's you make decisions on these sorts of things and
Yeah.
it goes how it goes.
Hmm.
So when did you really ramp up this business? When did it really get moving?
So I ramped up the business in July 2021
Okay.
when I was let go from my full-time corporate job. I was doing work for, I can't even remember the company anymore. I was there a couple months,
Okay.
and it was, and and my mother-in-law talked to my wife Maggie, and she said, "You should let Gabe try this for a little while, see if it pans out." And now we're in year two. We're in year two, going strong, and it's been going great.
That's fantastic. And it's
Yeah,
nice that it's nice to have such encouragement from your in-laws
yeah.
that they had your back
It
for
it
trying something like this.
yeah. It was really really nice, and just it was a blessing that happened.
That's really cool. So
Hmm.
is your wife involved in it at all? Does you show her pieces, you
Um,
have conversations about like,
yeah. So she comes shopping with me once in a while. Like
okay,
we get up at 5 in the morning together. We get to the sale at 6 a.m. or 5:30, and we wait for the sale to open at 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. to go in and buy things at an estate sale where I know I can buy things and resell it for more.
okay. So I mean, it's flipping in a way.
Yeah, it is flipping. That's
Okay.
what this business is. It's reselling.
Okay.
It's just I'm
See,
trying to
reselling's,
resell.
yeah, it sounds a lot better than flipping. I apologize.
Yeah, no, it's all good. I'm slinging every day. We're all slinging stuff.
That's true.
Just what
It's the hustle never stops,
Like
right?
you look at Sotheby's and Christie's, they're slinging $100 million pieces of art.
Listen, we should all be so lucky.
Yeah, one day.
One day. You seem very happy. I would imagine you're getting a lot more fulfillment doing this type of work than maybe the corporate 9 to 5.
Yeah, the corporate world wasn't where I was at. I also did work for a nonprofit that I was happy doing. I like helping people. I like doing things to help people and see results. And what I'm doing on my level, I'm buying things from individuals mainly where and I see what I'm buying from them helping them. Not only the money's helping them, but me unloading their items.
Yeah.
And and they don't need to think about where is this going to go when they pass away? What's going to happen to it?
Yeah, I mean that kind of thing is really, I mean, I know there are plenty of people who make who have made businesses, people I'm friends with who have made businesses out of helping empty nesters downsize, out of,
Hmm.
helping clear out, relatives' homes after a death in the family. Like that kind of thing weighs really heavily on
Yeah.
both like a surviving spouse and younger children, their children, maybe, as they've got to
Hmm.
think about what to do. So I mean there really
Yeah.
is, I mean that is an important service that to people who do that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I do and I buy very select items, but when I hear people's stories, I go a little bit more than what I typically do. I go and say these items should go to this place and these items should go to that place for whatever I can't buy.
Yeah.
And I just find different ways to just to help people because that's that's what we're doing at the end of the day is just trying to help people.
Helping people, really, you mentioned you worked at a nonprofit, but
Yeah.
it's very much sort of in the family, blood in the business. The
Yeah.
family business is helping people. Your father, of course, is Ted Flum, who recently stepped down from St. Paul Jewish Federation. He had been at JFS St. Paul before that. Use Jewish communal social service agencies. How much of that sort of that background of that being just part of your family and the family conversations you have played into that sort of that angle and that way of looking at what you do?
Like it's just how I was raised. I was raised that we should always be helping people in ways that we can afford to. And that's what I strive to do every day.
For sure. I mean,
I, I don't know how else to explain it. It's
no, I
yeah,
mean, that's a good way to live. Like if you
yeah,
can do that and feel good about your work
hmm,
and your life, like that's good, right?
yeah,
I mean,
hmm,
what else is there?
right. There's not too much left. Like as long as you love what you're doing, love the people around you, and love
That's
who you're working with.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like your father and your mom both very, they're entrenched in the Jewish community. How have you found
Yeah,
ways to sort of, obviously maybe not as much professionally like your dad has
hmm.
been, but what are some ways that you're trying to connect and fit in the Jewish communal
Oh,
space?
sure. So right now I'm on the Yala steering committee for St. Paul, Minneapolis.
Okay.
And I just joined a couple months ago, so I'm still learning my way around the steering committee, and I'm still trying to figure. I'm still trying to learn on what it's about and what we want to do as a group. I missed the last steering committee meeting, unfortunately. I was in Denver for the Jewish National Fund Conference
Oh,
for
sure.
Israel, and that was really meaningful. And it's just really important for me to stay engaged in many different aspects of community, whether it's local or national level.
So yeah, I had heard some really strong things about the conference.
Yeah, it was really, really good, really positive. We there were lots of protesters. We did not engage with them, which was really awesome. And we just stayed positive the whole time, just trying to figure out different ways to coexist with each other.
It's probably not the worst approach to take right now.
Yeah, yeah, we have to figure out how to exist peacefully.
Yeah, absolutely. I know it was sort of 2 months at this point as you and I are talking into the situation. Obviously, it's grown more challenging in a lot of ways to sort of have that, you know, casual or peaceful or calm coexistence in a lot of
Yeah,
spaces.
yeah, it is getting a little disappointing seeing how some people are reacting to the conflict.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's painful.
it is not terribly unsurprising, unfortunately, I don't think.
No, it's not surprising, but it's still nevertheless painful to see and hear on
Yeah.
a daily basis.
No, it certainly is. One of the things also that one of a coworker who had recommended that we speak for the podcast mentioned is that you're relatively newlywed.
Yeah, Maggie.
Maggie,
Yeah,
how did you two meet?
we
How did
we met at a bonfire, at a friend's bonfire, who
okay.
about 9 years ago now.
Okay.
And I was 21, she was 26. I was still in the middle of college and she was done. And she didn't want anything to do with me. Nothing, because we were just in different stages of life.
Sure.
And then, and then we remained friends. And I asked her out a couple times during those times. And eventually she warmed up to the idea and then we started dating and then we got married a year and a half later and
Oh,
here we are.
that's awesome. So have you mentioned, you know, you grew up with an uncle who, you know, he had a, you know, his antique shop in Madison Square, but
Yeah.
like, you know, your dad spent a lot of years in Las Vegas
Yep.
for work. So you've probably bounced around a little bit in
Ye-
sort of follow with where his profession went, you know, where his career went, you went too.
Yeah. So what do you mean by bounced around? I'm
I mean,
curious.
because I know that he had moved in a few different he worked in a few different didn't he work in a few different
Yeah.
places? Or was it
Yeah.
only I
So he
know
worked for Federation for a hot minute in Vegas.
okay.
And then he worked for United Way for 11 years,
Okay.
Boys
Oh, so
Town. And
He was just in Vegas and then here then, right?
yes, but before Vegas, it was New Orleans.
Oh, okay.
And I was born in New Orleans. I lived there a year and then we
Okay.
moved. Yeah.
Got it. So you've moved
Yep.
around a bit. You've seen some different communities. Obviously, New Orleans, a year in New Orleans might be a little
Yeah,
tough to
and I saw a lot of communities in Israel and in Europe because after birthright, I traveled around Israel for about 2 months, and then after Israel, I traveled around Europe for a month,
oh, that's great.
and I just went to different Moishe houses all across Europe and just experienced different communities, talked to different rabbis out there, and it was a good time just to see what community was from place to place.
Given that, what was the draw that brought you to Minnesota or to stay in Minnesota? Because obviously, you know, you're young, you have a
Well,
career where you could do a lot of different things. What's the pull to come to be here?
well, my family was here, and school isn't necessarily affordable outside Minnesota. And if you try to go to college, I'm like to Atlanta, I think school is like it was 15 to $30,000 a semester, and that just didn't make sense to me to go get a degree without knowing what you really want to do. So it was
Mhm.
more cost effective to stay here and live here and get my degree here. And I got to explore, got to travel, and figured out exactly what I wanted to do here.
Okay.
And then Maggie and I started dating, and that kept me here. And
Well, that's a pretty good draw too.
yeah, Um,
Yeah,
yeah, I
no.
finished school, then I traveled to Europe, came back here, started my business. It didn't work out as I planned the first time around. Then we started Maggie and I started dating, did some nonprofit work, and then started my business essentially, or restarted the business full time after that.
What did you learn about the business between the first attempt that maybe didn't work out how you like to this current time where it seems to be you're in a little better flow?
Sure. So I was the first time around, I was mainly focusing on consignment.
Mm,
And consignment wasn't really, I wasn't asking enough money for consigning, and I wasn't selling the types of products I needed to be selling.
okay. Well, it's good. It's like
Yeah.
you figured out what worked for you and
Hmm.
making having a better go at it this time.
Yeah. And I just figured out how to research items properly so that I know how what to ask for items and what would be realistic in selling the items online or locally versus just making up our own prices because there is a supply and demand behind everything,
Yeah.
from antiques to furniture to art. Like it, you just see what the market brings versus what you think it will bring.
And that's one of the things about this particular business and the products
Hmm.
that you're trying to sell that's really, I would think, challenging unless you're like immersed in it, because how much to charge and what the value of something is hard, I think, for especially on resale items
Sure.
necessarily to know. It's one thing if you go into a store and you see like a price tag on a new item, but on
Right.
something that's been, it's maybe more of a commodity, it's harder to know necessarily
Right.
what the right place to
And
price things are.
yes, and thankfully now with the internet, you're able to see recent sold prices for items that were sold online.
Hmm.
So I just sold six shot glasses, maybe like right before we hopped on our meeting for $95. And I was asking 195 for them. They're specialty shot glasses.
Okay.
And they roughly sell between 15 to $30 a shot glass.
Okay.
So when I got the offer for $95 for six of them, I said, okay, fine, let's get them moving. I think I maybe paid $10 for all of them. And that,
It's a pretty good turnover.
it is a good turnover. And it's just doing the price research on the back end, looking at different research tools that the internet has, um, and just making sure you're listing enough products to sell or listing enough products so that when you have a plethora of it, you just need like a few items to sell in order for it to be worthwhile. And just make sure you're keeping your stock up, if that makes sense.
No, for sure. For sure. You got to have some inventory. Otherwise,
Yeah,
if you don't have anything to sell, there's nothing to bring, can't bring anything in.
right, right.
Well, it makes all the sense in the world. Well, Gabriel Flom, last couple questions for you, and we will let you
Yeah.
get back on the hustle. First, what is your favorite Jewish holiday?
Your favorite Jewish holiday? Oh boy, that's a hard one. That's really tough. Um, well, can I give you two parts?
Sure.
Okay, so in Israel, I like Yom Kippur for
Okay.
because when I was in Israel, I was in Israel for the Chagim a few years ago for the high holidays, and I visited my cousins in Tecuma, which is like 5-10 kilometers from Gaza,
Hmm.
and it was just so quiet. It was insanely quiet, just no noise from anyone from anywhere, and it was just like, wow, we can have this all the time. I think we can have peace. and that that's one of my most fondest memories of Yom Kippur. And then probably here I like Rosh Hashanah just
Okay.
because I like when our families get together and we can have a meal together. It's not something that happens all the time, and we do have meals all the time, but or a lot of the time, but it's not it's a special, significant meal, and
Yeah,
we get to celebrate the new year.
that's right. It's not just a regular dinner together.
Right.
No, I get that. And speaking of meals, what is your favorite Jewish food?
Oh boy. So for me, it is my mom's breakfast.
Ah,
And yes,
excellent.
my
Don't
mom
get a
makes these.
Go
Hmm?
ahead. Go ahead.
My mom makes these. She learned from my softa, and they're these like they're not phyllo dough, but they're some sort of crispy dough, but then soft on the inside. And I can't remember what cheese she stuffs it with, but it's so delicious.
Don't get a lot of Barekas as an answer on the show. I really appreciate that. Those are delicious.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
I
Well,
love me
Gabe,
some baracas.
they are fantastic. They're really good. Well, Gabriel Flom, thank you so much for joining me. We will have the link to your Instagram at the TC Curator on Instagram. Some beautiful pieces of work that you've bought and sold that people can check out. Thank you for coming on, though. I really appreciate it. It was great to have you.
Thank you, Lonnie, and you have a wonderful Hanukkah and a good Shabbos tomorrow.
Thank you very much, and you as well. The Who the Folk podcast is a part of the Jew Folk Podcast Network and a product of Jew Folk Inc. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you have suggestions for other podcast guests, please email them to me at editor@tcjewfolk.com. For our other shows, check out tcjewfolk.com/podcast.